New Year's Eve is supposed to be loud and joyful, full of fireworks and countdowns, but the night I remember most felt unusually quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. I'm 25 years old now, yet that New Year's Eve from my childhood is still carved into my memory with painful clarity. I was 7 years old, my little brother Lucas was 4, and our parents were excited to attend a fancy party at a downtown hotel. They kissed us goodbye, promised they'd be back after midnight, and reminded us to behave. That night, they hired a babysitter named Jade. She was 19, a college student babysitting to pay for textbooks, and she was different from the others. She didn't sit on her phone or ignore us. She actually played with us, talked to us, and treated us like we mattered. She arrived around 7 in the evening, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail, carrying coloring books and snacks. Lucas instantly adored her, dragging her to the floor to show off his action figures, while I pretended I was too old for babysitters, even though I liked her too. She promised to let us stay up until 11 to watch the New Year's ball drop on TV, and told us our parents wouldn't be home until around 1. The apartment felt warm and safe, filled with cartoon noise, laughter, and the steady hum of the building's heating system. Time passed slowly, comfortably, until the night crept closer to midnight. Then, at around 11:15 p.m., everything changed in an instant. A woman's scream ripped through the hallway outside our apartment, sharp and filled with terror, followed immediately by the sound of glass shattering. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't celebration. It was fear. Jade froze. She stood up so fast the couch cushions shifted. She told us to stay where we were and slowly walked to the front door to check the peephole. From across the room, I watched her face drain of color, like all the blood had vanished at once. She didn't explain anything. She didn't raise her voice. She simply pulled out her phone with trembling hands and dialed 911, whispering that someone was in the building, that we were on the 8th floor in apartment 804, and that they needed to come immediately. When she hung up, she turned toward us and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was calm, but fear sat heavy behind it as she told us we were going to play a game, a quiet hiding game. And even at 7 years old, I knew that something was terribly wrong, and that our New Year's Eve had just turned into something we would never forget. Jade moved quickly after that, not running, but not wasting a second either, as if she already knew that time itself had become dangerous. She took Lucas by the hand, then reached for mine, her grip tight and reassuring in a way that made my stomach twist. She led us down the short hallway to the bathroom, flicked on the light for just a second, then lifted Lucas into the empty bathtub before helping me climb in beside him. The tub felt cold against my legs, and before I could ask another question, she pulled the shower curtain closed, plunging us into dim shadow. The bathroom light stayed on outside the curtain, making everything inside feel unreal and distant. Jade crouched down beside the tub, her face appearing faintly through the plastic curtain, and told us in a low, steady voice that no matter what we heard, no matter how scared we felt, we were not to come out. When I asked her what was happening, she paused, swallowed, and told me I had to be brave for my brother, that I had to stay with him and keep him quiet. Her voice shook just enough to scare me more than any scream could have. She told us she trusted us, that she was going to keep us safe, and then she stood up and walked away, her footsteps growing quieter as she moved back toward the living room. The bathroom fell completely silent, except for our breathing and the faint hum of the building's heating system. Seconds dragged into minutes, each one stretching painfully long. Then we heard it again, footsteps in the hallway outside the apartment, slow and heavy, stopping briefly at each door. With every step, my heart pounded harder, and I pulled Lucas closer, pressing his face into my chest and covering his mouth with my hand when he started to whimper. The footsteps stopped directly outside our door. Everything went still. The silence was so thick it felt crushing. Then, the doorknob rattled gently, almost politely, as if someone was checking to see whether it was unlocked. My entire body froze. A second later, something slammed violently into the door, hard enough to make the walls shake. Jade screamed, a sound full of panic and pain, and chaos erupted in the apartment. We heard furniture crashing, objects breaking, and heavy footsteps storming inside, moving fast and aggressive. The noise grew closer, room by room, until it felt like the person tearing through our home was only a few feet away, and I realized with terrifying clarity that whoever had come inside wasn't just looking to hurt someone, they were looking to hurt someone, and nothing about this night was going to end quietly.
The sounds outside the bathroom grew louder and more chaotic, like the apartment itself was being torn apart piece by piece, and with every crash, I was certain the person was getting closer to us. I held Lucas so tightly my arms hurt, my hands still pressed over his mouth as his small body shook against mine. Then the footsteps changed direction, slow and deliberate, moving straight toward the bathroom. The handle turned, and the bathroom door creaked open, letting a thin slice of light spill across the floor beneath the shower curtain. I stopped breathing. Through the cloudy plastic, I could see a tall shadow stretching toward the tub, blocking the light as it moved closer. My legs felt numb, my head buzzing so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The shadow paused right in front of us, and in that moment, I was certain we were about to die. The curtain shifted slightly, just enough for me to see the outline of a raised arm, and in his hand was something heavy with a squared edge. Even in the dim light, I could see dark liquid dripping slowly from his fingers onto the bathroom floor. Then, suddenly, Jade screamed from somewhere behind him, her voice sharp and desperate as she shouted for him to come back, telling him to leave us alone. The shadow spun away instantly, the light returned, and heavy footsteps rushed out of the bathroom as fast as they had entered. We heard Jade running, her footsteps pounding across the apartment toward the hallway, followed closely by his, faster and heavier. A door slammed open somewhere down the hall, and then another, and then everything blurred into shouting, radios crackling, and the distant wail of sirens cutting through the night air. It all happened so fast that my brain struggled to catch up. Moments later, someone pulled the shower curtain back, and a police officer was staring down at us, his face tight and serious as he told us it was over. Strong hands lifted us out of the tub and wrapped us in thick blankets as we were carried into the living room, which looked nothing like it had before. Furniture was overturned, glass covered the floor, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. I kept asking where Jade was over and over, but no one answered me. Then I saw a stretcher being rolled past the doorway, covered with a white sheet, and from beneath it, a blonde ponytail slipped out and swung slightly as it moved. My parents arrived not long after, crying and holding us so tightly it hurt, telling us we were safe now, that it was over. But I didn't feel safe, because even at 7 years old, I understood that the only reason we were alive was because Jade had chosen to put herself between 2 children and a monster, knowing she might not walk away from it. Everything after that felt unreal, like I was watching my own life through thick glass. Police officers filled the apartment, their voices low and urgent as they moved from room to room, radios crackling non-stop. Lucas was crying uncontrollably now, his face buried in my chest, while I sat frozen under a blanket that smelled of disinfectant and cold air. I kept asking the same question over and over again, "Where is Jade? Where is Jade?" But every adult avoided my eyes. My parents arrived about 20 minutes later, rushing in with panic written all over their faces, and the moment they saw us alive, they broke down, holding us so tightly it almost hurt. They kept saying we were safe, that it was all over, that we were okay now, but I couldn't stop staring at the hallway where the stretcher had disappeared. Later, we learned how bad it really was. Jade had chased the man away from the bathroom on purpose, screaming and running to pull his attention off us. He caught her near the stairwell and beat her brutally before the police arrived. She suffered broken ribs, a fractured skull, and internal bleeding so severe that doctors weren't sure she would survive the night. The man who attacked her was arrested in the building, still holding the weapon, his hands covered in blood. His name was Jax Ryder, and he had been released from jail just 3 days earlier. He was hunting for a man who had testified against him in court, someone who lived on our floor, but he didn't know which apartment was the right one. 2 weeks later, I visited her in the hospital with my parents. Her face bruised and swollen, tubes and machines surrounding her, but when she saw me standing there, she tried to smile. She could barely speak, but she whispered one sentence that broke me completely. "You stayed in the tub." I nodded and started crying, because even at 7 years old, I understood that my life and my brother's life existed only because a 19-year-old girl decided that we mattered more.
Years later, another New Year's Eve found me in a very different place, but the feeling was strangely familiar. That quiet sense that something was wrong even before it revealed itself. I was working the overnight shift at a small hospital, the kind of place that never really sleeps but never feels fully awake either. I'd taken the shift because I needed the money, and honestly, I expected a boring night of paperwork and half-asleep patients. Around 11:30 p.m., a blizzard rolled in hard and fast, the kind that erases the world beyond a few feet of visibility. Snow slammed against the windows, wind howled through the empty parking lot, and one by one, my phone lost signal. Even the landline flickered. I remember watching a horror video on YouTube just to stay awake, thinking how fake it all felt compared to real life, when suddenly something slammed against the hospital's front door so hard it echoed through the lobby. A second later, the door burst open and a man stumbled inside, nearly collapsing on the floor. He was soaked from head to toe, shaking violently and covered in blood. He was breathing fast, his eyes darting around the room instead of focusing on me. Like he said he'd hit a deer on Route 26, that his car had gone off the road into a ditch about a mile back, and that he'd walked the rest of the way through the storm. His teeth were chattering, and he kept rubbing his hands together, so I turned up the heat and grabbed gauze, asking if he was hurt and whether the blood was his. He said no, that it belonged to the deer, that it came out of nowhere. But as I started wiping the blood from his jacket, something didn't sit right. It was too dark, too thick, nothing like the deer blood I'd seen growing up around hunters in my family. When I asked where exactly he crashed, his answer came too fast, too rehearsed, and when I glanced toward the parking lot window, I realized something else that made my stomach tighten. I'd been watching that lot for hours, and I hadn't seen a single pair of headlights pull in. As the wind screamed outside and the clock crept closer to midnight, the man looked around the room again and asked a question that made my blood run cold. "Is anyone else working tonight?" I told him no, that it was just me and one nurse asleep in the back wing, and the moment the words left my mouth, his shoulders relaxed in a way that didn't feel like relief. It felt like confirmation. He thanked me too calmly, then asked if he could use the restroom, but instead of heading down the hallway, he lingered near the front desk, staring at the security monitor mounted on the wall. I noticed his hands then, how the shaking had completely stopped, how steady his fingers were as he leaned against the counter. Outside, the blizzard had grown so loud it sounded like something scratching at the building itself, and when the clock on the wall clicked over to 11:57 p.m., every light in the lobby flickered at once. That's when the nurse radioed from the back wing, her voice low and tense, asking why a man was standing in the ER hallway covered in blood when no ambulances had come in. I felt my chest tighten as I looked back at him, because he was smiling now, a thin, controlled smile, and he quietly said, "I told you I walked." Before I could respond, the security monitor changed on its own, switching to the outdoor cameras, and there, half buried in snow near the road, was a car turned upside down, its windshield shattered, its driver's door frozen shut from the outside. There were no footprints leading away from it, no trail in the snow at all. When I looked back at the man, his smile was gone, replaced by something empty and focused, and he asked me, almost politely, what time midnight was in this town. The emergency light snapped on a second later, bathing the lobby in a dull red glow, and the first thing I saw was that the man had moved closer without me hearing a single footstep. The clock on the wall ticked loudly now, each second stretching thinner than the last as it crawled toward midnight. He straightened his jacket slowly, almost respectfully, like someone preparing for an important moment, and said that New Year's Eve was special because it created gaps, small cracks where rules got loose and things slipped through unnoticed. I tried to call out to the nurse again, but the radio only spat out static, and the hospital suddenly felt massive and empty, like the walls had pulled farther apart.
Outside, the wind died all at once, the blizzard dropping into an unnatural silence, and that scared me more than the storm ever had. The man tilted his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear, then smiled again and whispered, "There it is." Midnight hit. Every monitor in the lobby flickered, and for just a second, the security screens showed something standing around his overturned car. Tall shapes clustered too close together, their outlines wrong, bending at angles that didn't belong to people. The man let out a shaky laugh, full of relief, and said he'd been afraid he wouldn't make it inside in time, that the cold slowed them down but never stopped them. That's when I noticed the blood on his clothes wasn't drying, it was spreading, soaking deeper into the fabric, as if it were fresh. He stepped back toward the door, unafraid now, confident, and told me he hadn't hit a deer at all, that he'd stopped when he saw something in the road, something pretending to be hurt. The front doors rattled violently, struck from the outside again and again, and shadows began sliding under the glass, stretching unnaturally long across the floor. As the man opened his arms like he was greeting old friends, he looked at me one last time and said, "Thanks for letting me wait. They don't like crossing thresholds alone." The doors burst inward with a deafening crash, and the last thing I remember before everything went black was realizing the hospital hadn't lost power at all. It had gone quiet, like it was holding its breath with me. I woke up on the floor sometime later, with the sound of alarms, screaming, and white light burning my eyes, the hospital suddenly alive with voices and running footsteps, like nothing had ever been wrong. Police reports later said a snowplow had found the wrecked car on Route 26 just after midnight, flipped over and empty, no body inside, no blood trail leading away from it, and no explanation for how the driver vanished in a storm that erased everything. They told me I must have gone into shock, that stress and exhaustion filled in the gaps with imagination, but they couldn't explain why the front doors were shattered inward, or why every outdoor security camera had corrupted footage starting exactly at 12 a.m. The nurse swore she heard knocking all through the night, soft at first, then desperate, but every time she checked the doors, nothing was there. I quit that job a week later, unable to stand the way hospitals sound at night anymore, how the halls echo when they shouldn't. Every New Year's Eve since then, right before midnight, my phone loses signal for a few seconds, no matter where I am, and sometimes, only sometimes, I catch the faint sound of knocking in the distance, slow and patient, like something waiting to be let in. I never open doors at midnight anymore, because I learned something that night they don't teach you in school or warn you about on the news. Some things don't break in by force, and they don't chase you forever. They just wait for the right moment, the right place, and someone kind enough to let them stay warm until the clock runs out.